Hello. Hello. That was pretty good. Can you say hello again? Hello. Okay, one more time. Hello. Hello. All right, now we're fired up. Welcome to the Green Space for Solutions Week. And what that means is we are going to work together tonight to find solutions to some of our biggest challenges in the 21st century. This is our fourth night together, so it's really Solutions 4 days. But we call it Solutions Week because it's a better hashtag. And we've had actually a fantastic week here with some of the brightest minds brought to us by Echoing Green. So let's give a big round of applause to start it out for Echoing Green. And later in the evening, I will embarrass some of the Echoing Green people who are here with us tonight and thank them along the way. But why don't I begin by starting our introductions of our three social entrepreneurs who are creating new and innovative pathways to employment, which is one of our great challenges, right here in the New York City area. Jordyn Lexton is the founder of Drive Change. Drive Change provides employment and transferable skills, training with food trucks to young people returning home. Oh, very well done. We had a big talk about where to sit. Sit under your face.
Got the first thing.
We're loosening up because it's the last night. I just want to say on the first night we did this, they actually didn't sit under their face. Brightest minds in New York, but they sat in the wrong place. It was very fun for the audience. Wow, what's going on here? Okay, so Jordyn is seated under her face. Founder of Drive Change, providing employment and transferable skills, training with food trucks to young people returning home from adult jail or prison. Let's give a big round of applause for Jordyn Lexton. Our next social entrepreneur, Donnel Baird, the founder of BlocPower. Hey, Donnel. Come on out. Come on down. BlocPower sells solar and energy-efficient technology to help houses of worship, nonprofits and small businesses, and multifamily residences cut energy costs. And our third entrepreneur, come on out, Jessamyn Rodriguez. It's going to make you a little hungry. She's the founder of Hot Bread Kitchen, which brings traditional bread recipes created by women to market in order to recognize the contribution of the immigrant communities. Let's give them all a big round of applause before we get started. So we have decided this week that the best way to work together in finding solutions is to first lay out the problems clearly. So each of our fellows is going to describe for us the problem as he or she sees it. So we're going to ask each of the fellows to respond to a very basic question from their vantage point. We're going to begin with Jordyn Lexton. How does racial inequality affect access to the pathways to employment from your vantage point, your vision, from where you sit?
So this question is the central question that I found myself asking while being a teacher on Rikers Island. And I was a teacher there for 3 years, and I worked with about 1,300 students during my time there. And that's because New York is actually one of 2 states that automatically incarcerates 16-year-olds like adults. And so as a result of that, young people spend time in adult facilities. And if they leave, they often leave with felony convictions as opposed to juvenile adjudications. And so the road ahead for young adults leaving the system is often paved with red lights, stop signs, dead ends, do not enter. And so through experience and conversation with my students, often we would talk about the framework of what do you need? What is the thing that is most necessary to potentially help foster sustainability and lower the rate of recidivism for young adults in the system? And employment was the central thing that people talked about. So Drive Change, which we decided to start a food truck business as a platform for transitional job employment opportunity, and as you said, teaching transferable skills to young adults, it came out of that framework because the structural racism that impacts the criminal justice system and our framework of white supremacy that has created that means that we needed to think critically about what access to opportunity in the form of employment looks like. And also what I think is really critical, though, is while that's where we started from, what I've learned over the last 2.5 years is that that's actually not the right question exactly to be asking, because it's not just about access to employment. The structural racism of our society, the ways in which white supremacy has established itself and established capitalism, means that workplace itself needs to be redefined. The way in which we redistribute power in the workplace is actually, now we're realizing, more critically important than thinking about just access to jobs. How do people actually access power? How do they access the kind of leverage that's going to allow them to have that long-term sustainable economic independence that is truly going to promote their own lives and their families' lives? And inside of the structure of the way in which we've curated and created capitalism, our own business models need to start reflecting different distribution of power structures, because right now they support the fundamental components of structural racism and white supremacy that has led us to this place in the first place. So now, sitting 2.5 years into running Drive Change, we're realizing that it's not just a question of access to employment, but actually a question of redistribution of power from within a system that was actually designed out of racial inequity in the first place.
Okay. I feel we could just go now. It's interesting because we've had 3 nights to this point, one on technology and race, one on healthcare, and one on criminal justice. And everything you just said seemed to be an intersection of all of those nights in your work. Now, I don't know if you had a chance to catch any of the other presentations, but, one woman talked about redesigning prison.
Yeah.
One of the other fellows.
Yeah.
Redesigning.
Redefine justice.
Redefine justice. And then, of course, we were talking in the green space about Mark and Rikers. And it's just fascinating to me that your work brings so many of our other fellows' work together in your vision.
Yeah, I think it's also important, too, to recognize that, it's also really important too, I think, when we're talking about racial equity, that we're not just, this was mentioned also just in the lobby, that we're not just talking about criminal justice reform, because also as well, I think what we're doing to some extent, even just by nature of me being a white person leading an organization where predominantly because of structural racism, the majority of the young people we work with are young people of color, even just in that own fabric of design, to some extent there's an element of confirmation bias that happens with that.
I was going to ask about.
Right? So I think it's also really critical and important that we're not labeling every person who's a criminal as a black person, every black person is a criminal. Those are parts of recognizing that the conversation has to extend much beyond just criminal justice reform, right, and be thinking about where the intersectionality of what you're talking about really exists.
Okay, lots to come back to. Donnel, let's come to you. And I'm going to repeat the question, as basic as it is. How do you see racial inequality and inequity affecting access to employment, if that's even the question you want to answer? Answer whatever question you want to answer.
Ditto. No, I thought your comments were quite well structured and comprehensive. I think for me, I'll talk a little bit about how I personally kind of interacted with some of these systems and the impact that they had on my life and my family's life. My parents are immigrants, kind of had to start from scratch again in Brooklyn. When they immigrated from the West Indies in the 80s, and at the time, Bed-Stuy, where I grew up, was still a slum. It was still a terrible neighborhood. It was an open-air drug market. And I remember being a 5-year-old and seeing, a shooting and thinking to myself, God, I don't want to be either person involved in that scenario. I don't want to be the person getting shot in the face, nor do I want to be the shooter, right? What a bunch of terrible options. And, getting older and thinking about employment as a way to break these kinds of cycles. The other thing that might be useful from my childhood is our building didn't have heat. It was super expensive. And so the landlord just didn't turn on the heat. And so we used to heat our apartment by turning on the oven and opening it up. And then opening the window because, of course, there's all sorts of carbon monoxide and particulate matter that comes out of the oven when you're using it for heat. And it's really unhealthy. But we'd open the window, as would everybody else in our building, as would everybody else in our neighborhood. So I became a community organizer after I graduated from Duke, and focused one neighborhood over from where I grew up, which is Brownsville, Brooklyn. And I know there's a fellow from Brownsville tonight. What up? Much respect. Brownsville's a really tough neighborhood, right? Contains 2 of the poorest census tracts in New York City. Really high rates of unemployment, real unemployment rates as high as 60, 70%. State government spends $1 million per block per year in Brownsville to incarcerate people who are residents from just that block. And HIV rates are sky high as well. And it just strikes me as a lot of waste. Yep. There's a waste of human potential. If you really believe that genius is distributed evenly throughout human beings, then people who are trapped in these kinds of neighborhoods, and Brownsville was created when, they ran a highway through the Bronx and moved the thousands of families, Black and Latino families that were there in the path of this highway. They just moved them all to Brownsville. They built 16 public housing complexes, stuffed tens of thousands of families there, and created the poorest census tracts in New York City. So if you're born into that neighborhood, what are the ways that you can think about getting out? For us, it's really tough because of the stuff that you mentioned. We think about how to access that waste as an opportunity, waste of the human potential that's there, but also just the waste in the buildings. So if you walk around Brownsville in the winter and look at the 17, 18-story buildings, even if there's snow on the ground and it's freezing, the windows are open, right, in the housing complexes. That's because the buildings are being overheated. They're uncomfortable. People have to open up their windows again to modify the temperature and the air quality in their apartments. So if you look at public housing across New York City, we're wasting $100 million a year on burning fossil fuels to heat buildings and overheat buildings. We could reduce carbon emissions. We can invest that $100 million in job creation or whatever else we choose by accessing the kind of waste that's occurring in these buildings as an opportunity. And so as an entrepreneur, that's what we focus on at BlocPower.
And I love your phrase, genius is distributed equally, which is so powerfully simple. So why doesn't everyone understand that?
Well, what does it mean if you go back to the conversation you had about race and technology on Monday? If you believe that genius is evenly distributed, that means there's a Mark Zuckerberg that's part of a minority population that is just having challenges accessing capital or computer classes early on. For us, it actually creates an opportunity. We are able to hire tons of incredibly brilliant and talented people, women, people who are racial minorities who come from immigrant communities that are just overlooked by the tech sector. Mm-hmm. I'm a clean energy, technology entrepreneur. I'm funded by Silicon Valley venture capitalists. But my team is 95% diverse, and it's just not a thought. We hire the best talent available, and the best talent is available because they're overlooked by the kind of dominant, technology companies. And so we're able to even negotiate a better deal for better talent because these folks are being ignored by everybody else. So one of the possibilities of genius being evenly distributed is when you deal with these large structural systems, what does it look like to have an Airbnb or an Uber, right? A huge startup that is focused on solving problems of race and employment or race and technology, where the owner of the company can just make decisions. I'm going to hire ex-offenders. I'm going to hire people who age out of foster care because I know that there's genius there in those populations. And so that's fundamentally the hypothesis that we're testing out at BlocPower.
Thank you. And finally, Jessamyn Rodriguez, let me ask you the same question. How do you see racial inequality affecting access to employment from where you sit?
Yeah, so I, unlike Jordyn and Donnel, came at the work that I do from a gender lens. The work that we do is helping women get good jobs in the culinary industry, and it is, going on this idea of genius being equally distributed. In most parts of the world, women bake bread and hold a lot of culinary talent and interest, but in North America and New York, men are getting those jobs. And so I'm Canadian, and so it was very natural when I had the idea for starting an organization to come at it from a gender perspective and to focus on immigrants. Like initially the idea that I had and the idea that Echoing Green funded in 2008 was really about helping immigrant women get better jobs in the culinary industry. And that felt really relevant in Canada, and that felt really relevant, and it's a good story, and we're a social enterprise, so we're trying to sell bread, and so good stories are really important. And in 2010, with the partnership with New York City, we moved into East Harlem. And very quickly, the purely immigration-focused, the purely women-focused work that we were doing didn't feel quite so relevant. And being in New York City and operating in East Harlem, which has by far the highest unemployment rates in New York City and some of the highest definitely the highest in Manhattan and some of the highest in New York City, and we're in the middle of the largest public housing tract. We're located 115th and Park Avenue, and we're in the middle of, in La Marqueta, in the middle of the biggest housing tract, and has huge unemployment rates. And we very quickly realized that to not address kind of a holistic look at labor and racial inequality was sort of missing the point. And so since 2010, we've shifted the mission. We provide a 6-month paid training to women, at which point they graduate out into good jobs in the culinary industry, mostly in bakeries around the city, where often they are the first woman to be hired. Very rarely are the first minority hired, but very frequently they're the first person that's either a native English speaker or the first person that speaks a different language that they're being placed into. Mm-hmm. So I see the work around racial, we are a little bit different. We call ourselves the United Nations of Bread. At any given moment, we are truly representative of the diversity of New York City, but now this last year in 2016, 58% of the women that we served were born in New York City, because that's who needs the advocacy on jobs. So that's sort of my roundabout answer.
It's interesting because one of our women on the night of criminal justice, Gina, talked about having been raised as a race person, but having come to a place of feminism. And in this country, many of us feel a pull between race and gender.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to that, given your work and your evolution?
I think being Canadian means you're an immigrant person.
And I think a lucky person.
In your home, that's another. Yeah. We can talk about that. I think it means being an immigrant person, and I think being a woman means you're a woman person. But being a social justice activist and not addressing racial inequity, living in a city that's as stratified, working in an issue around workforce development and labor, and not addressing and head-on recognizing the vast inequity that is racially based, is missing the point.
And it gets back to intersectionality. Did any of you hear anything just now in listening to one another state the problem that struck you or that surprised you or was new to you?
I did not know that you we're majority New York City residents now. That's really interesting.
It's a big shift, and it's an interesting decision about, because we're a social enterprise and we're trying to do that work, how we tell that story. Mm-hmm. We sell a line of multi-ethnic breads from around the world that support the training. And so the ethnicity of the breads is really important. But in terms of like what our selection criteria are, you have to be low income, you have to have some kind of barrier to good employment, and you have to love cooking. And you know what? Women from New York and women from Morocco and women from Mexico and women from Dominican and men from all those countries too have unrealized talent in those areas. And, you know, it wasn't even a tough decision. It just sort of seemed like the obvious thing to do, recognizing what we needed to have the most impact that we could in New York City. And when we expand to Toronto, it'll be interesting to see whether that's still the relevant paradigm. You know what I mean? Like but to be, I think, operating in this country and only serving foreign-born individuals didn't feel relevant.
Now we're going to expand to solutions. Did everyone get a green postcard? Raise your hand. Thank you. Raise your hand if you did not get a green postcard, because we need to get you one. Don't be shy. Wow, we did a good job tonight. All right, everyone's got one. All right. So the green postcard has your 3x10 commitments on it. If you look at the card on the fully green side, you'll pretty much see what I'm talking about. Do you all have your cards? You do? Card. Okay, good.
Am I supposed to?
No, you all know what it is, and lots of you know what it is too. But we're going to have somebody who really gets it and is prepared to make a commitment stand up and explain it to us a little better. This is Jana Oberdorf, and she's a communications expert, so she's going to really communicate this well.
No pressure.
She is also largely responsible for what's happening here, because I have to thank you yet again for helping us. We've been working on this for months and months, almost a year, helping us put this week together. She's our Echoing Green liaison, and we met many months ago and started structuring this week, and now she's going to explain to us all about the 3x10 commitment so that we can start to make some commitments in this room together tonight. Jen.
Yeah. Thank you guys all for coming. So we really want you all to feel like you can be a part of the solution this week and at this night's events. So we're going to ask you to fill out this 3x10. We want you to think about what is one commitment that you can make to social change in 10 days, in 10 weeks, and in 10 months. And the goal here is to really think about some short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals that you can set for yourself, you can write down on paper, and hold yourself accountable to whether or not you've achieved them. We've talked a lot about this over the last few nights, but for some people, short-term goals are really easy. They can think about tweeting something, and long-term goals are hard. For others, they can nail 10 months but don't know what to do tomorrow. And so this is really a sort of mental challenge for you to think about how can you set some goals for yourself now, tomorrow, and into the future. And Jami makes me tell you a commitment of my own every night now, so I'm prepared.
But she's done this every night for a week.
After the first night, I got prepared, Jami. I thought about it ahead of time. So I have a commitment, and I actually have a request from the panel to help me think about how to make my commitment happen. So my commitment is in 10 weeks, I want to try to become more of a conscious consumer. I want to think more about the things I buy and what I put my money to, and especially sort of in the last few months, thinking about voting with your wallet and all of that. It's a little bit clearer to me what I should not buy. What is a little harder for me is what should I buy? How do I find companies and organizations like you? How do I go to stores and make sure that I am supporting incredible work? But that's my commitment in 10 weeks, and I ask you guys to help us think about, as consumers, how can we do that better?
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Yeah. And the commitment.
and the commitment, because I think it makes a really big difference. And I don't think I have anything particularly unique or surprising to say here, but that your dollars do make a difference to small businesses, and that small businesses are owned by people who are putting blood, sweat, and tears and are employing their family members and creating very often a new opportunity for their family. And it's really important to do that. So at Hot Bread Kitchen, we run a bread business. Definitely buy our bread.
Yeah, definitely do that.
We're buy our bread is a good way. All of the money goes back to doing more training, and you can buy us in the green markets and at Whole Foods and a bunch of other places. But we also support 75 food businesses that operate out of our incubator. 82% of those are owned by women, 65% of them are owned by minorities, 40% are foreign born, and those are all struggling entrepreneurs, and they're distributed everywhere. And I would say we support with everything: distribution, financing. The consistent challenge that they have is access to market. How can they sell more products? Sales solves all problems is what I say all the time to my staff. Sales solves all problems, and for startup entrepreneurs, that is the core issue. So your dollars make a big difference. A $20 lunch ordered from Chipotle is not helping anyone out. A $20 lunch from a small scale entrepreneur that you walked an extra 10 blocks for, it does really make a difference. And so be consistent, be a good customer, Yelp about them, tweet about them, because that makes people, it's hard work that we're doing. Right, Jordyn?
Yeah, I was going to say this quick answer is film Super Size Me 2 and just order hot bread and from the truck and do it for a full year. But I think absolutely, I think it matters so much. I think, some other, it's not everything, but certainly with the introduction of benefit corporations and a little bit more transparency, there are available resources to understand and know what some practices are. So if you don't know what benefit corporations are, or you don't know what B Corp is or B Lab, those are some things to look up and to kind of do some investigation in. I do think also pushing your organizations, employers, friends, family. I think over the course of even just the last year and a half that I've been an Echoing Green Fellow, I've seen Echoing Green make different decisions about vendors, specifically when it comes to food, which I think is great. And the choices that we're making on that level are really significant, and I think that it really speaks volumes. So those are kind of the concrete things that I would try to add.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, or perhaps even humbly suggest, that you can push your employer or within your employer, if there's a lunch or a dinner or a night out or a holiday event or anything like that, to be thinking creatively about how you cater that or where you go, or
call me.
Yeah, you can cater. It's my mom does our catering. She's in the audience, but so don't overwhelem her too much. But you can send an email to cater at
that was a smart choice.
She's right here. It's very convenient.
She'll be here after the event.
Yeah, for me, one of the things we wanted to test out when we started our company was that we know that in thinking about climate change, there's a bunch of psychographic studies about millennials and about the American population as a whole that say that, there's about 100 million people who are either concerned or super duper alarmed about what's going on with climate change. People feel powerless. They don't feel like there's anything that they can do to impact it. And so part of what we wanted to do is to create a platform where people could put their money where their mouth is. And so, we have projects in the Bronx. We have a project in Brownsville where we're installing 2 megawatts of solar panels on top of the public housing complexes where I was a community organizer. We're doing 5 megawatts of battery storage so that we can store the electricity from the solar panels and sell it to the utility company and generate, I think, like $500,000 of revenue for the people who live in these poor census tracts. But we also want to open it up so that it's not just Wall Street investors who can invest and make a 6 or 7% return, but to register with the Securities and Exchange Commission so that, regular people, unaccredited and investors can put $1,000 towards a solar project in New York City's poorest neighborhood. In a city as great as New York, there's lots of people with resources and who are very passionate about what's going on across the city and these issues.
How will you get the word out about that?
Well, that's why I'm here.
Once
You go to BlocPower.io and you take out your credit card and you can green buildings and hire people to green those buildings, hire ex-offenders, people who age out of foster care. That's what we do.
And if we're all paying Con Ed, is there anything we can do to make them more conscious for those of us who just have regular energy?
Absolutely.
consumption?
So there's a new law that Governor Cuomo just passed that allows you to choose to purchase your electricity from solar panels in Brownsville instead of from whatever Con Ed's doing to burn
How do we do that?
natural gas, right? So instead of burning natural gas upstate and then, sending the electricity down to New York City and then you just kind of pay for it, you can say, no, I want to purchase my electricity. I want it to come from the solar panels that were installed in Brownsville. It's called, New York State Community Solar. And you will get a separate charge on your Con Edison bill that would allow you to have significant percentages of your electricity consumption be produced in low and moderate income neighborhoods in New York City or across New York State. It's awesome. Solar power, wind power. So it's a cool innovation that just happened in New York State. The governor's not getting quite enough credit for it, but we think it's an interesting way of bringing together the problems of race and employment and climate change into one neat solution so that people can put their money where their mouth is, buy clean energy, make a financial return, save some money, hire some people from communities that you're concerned about.
And that's a commitment
Yep.
people could make.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm going to
Absolutely.
make that commitment today. That's
Great.
awesome.
All right. Now, we are going to ask you, if you're willing to share some of those commitments, but also give you an opportunity to ask some questions. So I'm going to come on out there and come around with a microphone so you can ask your questions. But feel free to share your commitments either as you're asking your questions or if you just feel like you got to jump up and share your commitment, do that, church style. Or whatever faith, we're open. Vasiki, I want to say this is Vasiki. He's with us in the WNYC newsroom. He has been here every night filling out his card. This is the fourth night, all those nights, every night, just like Jana, with the commitments. So if he did that for 4 nights, you can do 1 night of commitments. All right, who's got a question? If you don't ask a question, oh, good. Because I will call on you. I used to be a law professor. I do the Socratic method. Hello. I'm so well. It's so good to see you. Thank you for your work. You have to stand, though, and tell everybody else who you are. Because I know you're a celebrity, but they don't.
God bless you.
Most of them do, but some of them. Here, come this way so they can see you.
My name is Jordyn Lewis-Allen. I'm a 2016 Echoing Green Fellow, founder and CEO of Made in Brownsville, and it's a creative agency that we teach young people in Brownsville design and technology through creative commissions. Thank you guys for being on the panel and awesome discussion. I'm curious, sometimes the people that we serve don't know what they don't know about access to employment, and I was wondering what's a way that you guys determine what the barriers to employment are for folks, how you tease it out of them or to assess it in a way. So,
Excellent. Thank you.
That is a trick question.
He knew that.
Well, I'm gonna go back to my point about genius being evenly distributed, and in all groups of people, you're gonna find people who can knock down whatever barriers put in their place, others who cannot, and some who are in the middle who can with the right assistance. And it is difficult to figure out where people are in that. You can test for aptitude, there's soft skills, there's skills that only show up, in terms of leadership or other intangibles that are hard to figure out in the interview process. So who do you figure out that you give a shot to in terms of employment? For us, what we do is we have what we call the BlocPower Innovation Fellowship, and that's just a fancy term for a tryout.
Yeah, we do a tryout also.
So we set a period of time, 3 to 6 months. We tell people that we're going to not pay them very much money so they can self-select for passion, right? Because you can't work at BlocPower if you're not passionate about what we do. And we're not a social program, so you have to be passionate, you have to be talented, you have to graduate at the top of your class. You have to be someone who is going to be able to exploit an amazing opportunity. And we've been fortunate to find just tons and tons of people who meet that standard. So I don't know if that is helpful as an answer, but that tryout is a mechanism that we use that seems to work.
Yeah, I was going to say that we just tried not to make too many assumptions. So one of the things that we decided was that in terms of the ability to come in and become a Drive Change Fellow, the number one thing we're looking for is your commitment. And drive. Like, there are lots of things, especially populations of young people coming home from jail and prison that are facing incredible barriers. That's real, and that has to be acknowledged. But we also don't want to assume that just because somebody's homeless or just because somebody potentially has another issue that somebody might deem making them inaccessible to employment, that they're not going to show up. So we do a tryout also. It's a little shorter. It's 2 days.
Y'all are ruthless.
But yeah, that's brutal. But we've developed a process where there's now
show up and show out.
But in the spirit of also like sports and teams and competition, it's actually kind of in a lot of ways similar to what Echoing Green does in the finals round. And like we have we have an application, and then after the application, there's from there you have to come to our food protection course. And if you come to the course and you're on time for the course and all of that, and you pass the course, you're moved into the possibility of being there for a tryout, and then we make selections out of the tryout. And what that process allows for us is it shows us people's commitment, people who are showing up, who really want to be there, and looking for the things, kind of some more of that, the essential skill stuff that actually we think is what makes for really valuable communities and valuable employees. So those are kind of some of the things that the way that we try to address what some of those assumptions might be about what barriers to employment.
And I want to amend my answer. Jessamyn, I don't know if you have anything to...
I was going to say we have a 2-hour tryout. But we have it down to a science, and it works really, really well.
It's like the first batch of bread, does it?
I think like the selection is the art of it, and we are 100% of the women that graduate from our training program are placed. So we take 1 out of every 10 women that apply to the program, and we know that we check on their application for employability. If they have a resume or are coming out of situations where they have jobs, they generally don't make it to the interview phase, and then we bring people into work, and in the first 30 days we try hard to, if they don't show up, then unfortunately they get cut from the program. Because we're guaranteeing placement, we're pretty brutal, and it's a paid training, and it's not for everybody. We put them on payroll, so just like we can talk more to being super nitty gritty. We really try hard. It is a job for people, and I feel like to ensure the workforce development outcomes and the retention rates that we want to get on the other end, we make it as competitive as it, as rigorous as it needs to be.
It's interesting that all three of us have a really hard edge in terms of the way we think about recruitment. I think for us, and this is a trend that you see in Echoing Green more broadly, I think there's like 50% of the 3,000 people who apply to Echoing Green every year now have hybrid organizations where they may have a for-profit and then they have a nonprofit partnership structure. For us, we have a nonprofit that we launched that is focused on the people who are in the middle. They're not they're not the people who can kind of kick down any barrier. They need a little bit of assistance, but with that assistance, they will be able to perform. Knuckleheads who don't own alarm clocks, we can't worry about those people at this time. But so our nonprofit, we raise philanthropic capital to provide that kind of wraparound support and assistance to people who may need a little bit more support to get them to the point to where they're ready to work and kind of participate and take full advantage of an employment opportunity full time.
Yeah, I think also like it rests in attention, I think, too. Part of in thinking about, again, going back to some of the beginning ideas around the structural designs of workplace and what those structural designs are, I think it rests in attention, and certainly for us as a supportive workplace environment where we want to, encourage people to know that they can make mistakes and not get fired instantly, that also means we have to kind of understand to what extent, how much support is too much support. We're also intentionally transitional, so we want individuals to be able to go on and thrive anywhere that they go. And unfortunately, again, because we exist in a society where the structures are capitalistic and coming out of the tension that's coming out of, it sometimes means that we have to make decisions about our own businesses to help people fit into the majority of businesses outside of that space. But that's always a tension and always really hard, because we want to try to work to break down what some of those structures actually are.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, sorry, Justina Lai. You've talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to hear just a little bit more. As you were building your organizations, one of the principles of social justice is to think about how you empower beneficiaries to be participants in developing their own sort of products and services that serve them and benefit them. So I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about how you thought about that in the development of your organizations. And then secondly, for those of you who have investor capital and need to provide a rate of return to that investor or investors, I'd be curious as to how you think about how value creation is shared across all stakeholders. So not just how you deliver that 6 to 7% return to investors, but how much of that 6 to 7% or the total return that you're generating should be ultimately given to other members of the community, to
it's all mine.
To yourself, to your employees, and to investors.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Those are both really good questions. One concrete thing, and we were thinking about this a lot. We actually don't take investment money. We are a hybrid. We're a nonprofit that wholly owns a for-profit subsidiary, but our for-profit doesn't actually make enough money for us to have investors at this point. But what we do in terms of the latter part of your question, so we thought a lot about the tipping structure and power and stuff. And so we actually now all of our fellows earn a percentage of sales. So in terms of business ownership and revenue share, the thought is that you as a fellow then have way more ownership over that income than relying on a consumer who then holds power by way of their own money about whether or not they tip or not, basically. So that's just one way that we've been thinking a little bit about redistribution of finances and what that can look like within our current structure. So yeah, that's one thing that we're doing. And then we've tried to create a seat for a fellow on our board also too, which can help to inform some of that long-term decision making.
Oh, in my next life, I want to be an energy tycoon so I can offer a 7% return on investment. Bread is a very low margin business, so I'm not the best to address that. We have some debt investors that are, socially motivated and have, worked with us as we've grown the business. So I can't really address that question. Around the question around empowerment, for the women that work with us, the ability to secure a full-time job with benefits is the ultimate empowerment. And I think that we really think about empowerment from the place of economic empowerment and the transformation that happens in the 6 months when they go from coming from generally unemployment or informal work or incarceration or situations where they're fleeing domestic violence and then get this kind of intensive 6-month training and transition into a full-time job where someone's going to pay you for vacations is, for me, the ultimate empowerment. And that's really where I recognize it's so much more complicated than that. But I think for me, that is the most direct intervention that we can have. And it works.
I'm trying to think of the way that my wife, who's in the audience, would want me to answer this question, and it's not coming to mind, so I'm just going to answer the way I'm going to answer it. She's just much more sophisticated than me. I think that I don't really believe in empowering people. I think that that's like a liberal practice. It is a code of conduct that we've inherited that often is so broadly used that it might become meaningless. So I'm not here to empower people in Brownsville. He doesn't need empowerment, right? I think that at BlocPower, we're focused on winning. We think that in terms of climate, in terms of race and employment, there are real significant challenges that we face. Where if we lose, there will be significant consequences. And I know after our recent election, we've all are steeped in what the real consequences of losing are. And so we don't prioritize a process of empowerment way up on the totem pole as our huge priority. Our priority is to win. Our goal is to become a $1 billion company that goes public, super capitalist. And to do so on behalf, right, of the communities that we care about, the people that we represent, but to compete in the private sector in such a way that we don't need to empower people, because you can't win unless you listen to customers and unless you have customers co-design the products and services that you're offering them. And so by being successful, it forces you in some ways to really listen to the communities that you represent. But part of what I heard in your question was kind of a technical question, and so I'll try to speak to that quickly. So we are a public benefits corporation, which allows me as CEO and all of our management team to prioritize social and environmental impact, the reduction of carbon emission, the employment of hard-to-employ individuals over our financial returns to our investors. And so when our VC investors invest in BlocPower, they have to decide, am I comfortable with Donnel and Morris and the management team at BlocPower, because they may decide that they really want to green all of Brownsville and they want to use solar, hot water, renewable energy, slightly more expensive, lower financial return than if we just did natural gas as a bridge fuel, for example, right? And so some of our investors say, well, we want you to maximize that economic return, so we want you to forget about the solar hot water panels, do the natural gas. There's a 9% return there. The solar panel is only a 4% return. So we as management have structured into the operating principles of our company the ability to make decisions that prioritize social and environmental impact. So there's a balance that we try to strike, and we try to be clear with people when they partner with our company, about what we're about. I don't know if that's helpful.
Coming back to empowerment, putting aside the semantics.
Yep.
So you do believe in full community engagement, involvement, etc. You just don't like that old tired word empowerment.
Yeah, so the project that we're structuring in Brownsville, we are building a micro utility that will be 51% owned by community residents of the lowest income neighborhood in New York City. And that micro utility that they will own 51% of is a profitable organization that will provide a financial return to them, will provide a return to Wall Street, will provide a return to any people who choose to invest, and will generate $500,000 a year that those residents can do with as they wish. But of course they can do whatever they want to with that capital. They're owners of a new corporation, and like any other corporation, as those profits on that net income is generated, then they'll be able to make decisions as owners of that micro utility as to how they'd like to allocate those profits. Do they want to invest in workforce development so they can train themselves to install more solar panels? Do they want to fix their local school? Do they have repairs in their buildings do they want new kitchen cabinets? And so in a way, empowerment can be structured into these kinds of structures.
Okay, now I have been a question. All right, I've been walking around not just to get questions, but because I'm spying on your cards and I see you writing on them. So that means you all have made some commitments. So after I take this woman's question, I'm hoping some of you will volunteer your commitments. And then panel, I'm going to ask you to share, at least one or two of you, I may pick on one of you, to share a commitment that you'd like the audience to make in furtherance of your mission. Hello.
Hi, thank you.
Hold it nice and close.
Okay.
Not too close.
Okay.
Don't be nervous.
I'm a little nervous.
Not about what you're going to say, just about my...
Oh, okay. Hi. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to attend. My name is Nina Friend, and I'm currently a student in journalism school, and we've been talking a lot in my classes and forums and things like that about the role of journalists in this sort of coming, strange, confusing moment that we're in right now. So I'm wondering, as the founders of these amazing organizations, the types of articles in journalism that you all either would like to be reading within the next several months and years or don't see being written currently.
Well, following people on Twitter is not going to work, clearly, right? I mean, so we do have to get back to a model of journalism where resources are focused on investigative journalism and getting to the bottom of things, like crazy stuff in Russia, stuff like that. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, exposure in the media is helpful, and I think anything that we can do to provide compelling parts of our story to you that makes sense to you guys in terms of content, like we certainly want to offer. From BlocPower, we certainly want to offer you that kind of content.
Jordyn, that gave you a headache, I saw.
Oh, no, I was just, I guess yes is the short answer to that. I was trying to think about how to answer the question, honestly. Because I think the comment I want to make that I hope is related to the question is just that I really think that the language that we choose to use is very important in framing some of these issues. So in terms of a commitment that, like, for example, I would hope the audience would walk away with, one specific thing is that I hope every audience member refers to a person coming home from jail and prison as either formerly incarcerated or returning citizen, as opposed to labels like ex-con, former inmate, whatever the case may be that's labeling somebody by way of a moment and experience and more revealing of that structural racism that's underneath it. And I think that even in the space of employment and employers, so we're very adamant about, using the language of being a fair chance employer instead of a second chance employer. And I think that those subtle differences in the way in which the language is constructed in journalism is really, really important. Because it matters. It matters the same way that visual images confirm our biases. When we read, it confirms or eradicates our biases. And so I believe that the language construction inside of journalism is really crucial to forming some of the critical thought that hopefully comes out of the next, however long.
So, Jordyn, we meet... my God, it feels like weekly, but we meet regularly to talk about the words we use at WNYC in the newsroom. You heard Jennifer talk about some of the reporting we've been doing, and we will sit down and talk about whether to say formerly incarcerated, for example.
Yeah, returning citizen, I think,
right.
Is a good...
So would you come and sit down with us and go through some... I mean, I can pull out the inch-thick guidelines. Sometimes I'm on the air actually speaking, going like this, flipping through the guidelines. And it's online, too, but it's somehow faster to do it in paper, because I'm old school. So would you come and sit down with us?
I would love
talk
to.
Through some, and I know there are other people we can talk with.
I was going to say that there are plenty of people who are formerly incarcerated themselves.
I know, but somehow I feel like they're going to listen to you.
I don't know.
You're very compelling.
One of the things I think is, though, really important, I mean, not that this is the question you're asking, but I do think truly that, I don't know for those of you who were here earlier this week, but on Tuesday there was a conversation around intersection of criminal justice and race. And it's one of the only movements where people who are directly impacted by the movement have traditionally not been at the forefront until most recently. So if you look at any other movement, queer movements, women's movements, et cetera, it's always the people directly impacted. And that voice is the most necessary voice in the movement. So I'd love to talk to you, but I think there probably are other people. Yeah, call Glenn. Call Glenn, yeah.
And Glenn.
Yeah, for sure.
I just have two quick responses. That conversation is fascinating, and I think it's the same thing with immigrant, right? I don't think there's necessarily as many things, and it's not nearly as loaded, and I think
that's one of the
much more sensitive.
Discussing.
Yeah, I'm sure we do too, and so I want to sit in on your discussion of that topic, because I think it's a similar thing. But I can respond really quickly from the perspective of food journalism, because I think people are hungry for stories. I think we're all getting a little over star chef syndrome, and I think if it's definitely on TV and what's written in the newspapers, like it's just really focused a lot on a few people, and I think those people are getting more diverse. But I think I'm hungry for stories about makers, and this isn't just for food, but like the people that are making it. Right in New York, I think there's a handful of star farmers, but like we want more stories of victorious stories of farm workers, interesting stories about line chefs and where they came from. Like that to me is what is a really interesting opportunity, and I think it translates to kind of lots of production and labor focused stories, because I think if I could ask one thing, it's like we got to get good stories that help to humanize this people that live in this country together, and that is to me the only answer to how we get ahead. And I think the other thing I want to say is that, I think there was a lot of talk after the election about where to give money. Everybody went to the ACLU, and I renewed my subscription to the New Yorker. I renewed my membership to WNYC and WFUV. I went. Sure, you're welcome. I renewed the subscription to the New York Times and the Wall Street. That is what we all need to do as citizens. We have to support good journalism, because that's the only thing we got right now.
That's a commitment. Nina, you gave us a good idea for a green space conversation about language in journalism, I think, right? Yes, please ask a question. And then that was a great commitment that you had, but you probably have two more on your card. And then I'm going to ask each of you to ask the audience for a commitment. Please tell us who you are.
My name is Vidal Guzman. I used to work for Drive Change. I'm an activist myself. I'm also with the Closed Rikers member. I am a community organizer. I do Black Lives Matter, did all the protests. But the thing about it is, I wanted to answer her question, if that's okay with you. That's okay. The thing about it is that the stories they're out there. You just got to reach. You got to go to neighborhoods that's everything is going on, problems that's going on.
I hear what you're saying, so I'm holding.
All right. What I believe is that we have stories that's out there in our communities, and you got to be able to go to the communities that's everything's happening, where crimes is being happening, with people that's coming home that's incarcerated or been doing a lot of times. You have to go where is everything happening. If you want a good story, you want to tell people and show people what's going on in our community, people also have to open their eyes and also have open ears, because that's what we tend not to happen. Like, people don't want to hear about it sometimes. They tend to not fall to that because it haven't happened to them, or it haven't happened to their family member. So when we tend to be more open-hearted and have open ear and keep our eyes open, that's when we start seeing change, and that's when we start noticing, and that's when our community start changing. The only way we could change anything is to really reach out and start helping. And the only way you can help is, going out there and helping any type of way you can.
Let me ask you a question. So in the space where I think one of the fears that potentially I have, and you can totally eradicate that fear, but is that there's an element of sensationalization in journalism, like a sense of it with outlets like WNYC, New York Times, et cetera, that are reaching mostly households where people are not from the neighborhoods that you're talking about, that by nature of writing without a lot of information, insight, understanding about those stories, that there's an element of sensationalization. How do I say that word? Whatever. That people are like, ooh, wow, oh my God, wow, it's so hard, it's so intense, the hood, whatever.
Voyeurism.
Right, and so voyeurism, exactly. So I guess my question is, what do you think about that? Do I have the wrong perspective? Is it better that people, read and understand, and how? What do you think based off of that?
I don't think people should read about it. I think people should find out for themselves, hand to hand, what's really going on. That's the most best you could get solution to anything, is to really see it with your own eyes. Sometimes reading something is not going to really give you an answer about anything you're trying to solve. You know what I'm saying? So my best thing is for journalists to really go out there and find a story, is to go and experience, ask questions that's going on and that's happening to the problems that's affecting people, or whatever you're trying to research. That's the best way you could do anything.
My best solution is you go to journalism school and you write the story.
Journalists don't get paid a lot. You should come work for BlocPower. I want
I can't argue with that.
I do. We don't pay a lot of BlocPower the first couple months, though. I think that still got to do a tryout.
6 month tryout.
I do want to follow up on that. I think that one of my community organizing mentors, Mike Geekin, who runs the Industrial Areas Foundation, right after the election said, "God, so many people on the coast are so upset, but they're surprised." And people, particularly in the minority community, will say, "God, feels like we just got dragged back to like 1961 or something," right? Which it does feel that way. And you said church, so I'm just being very direct here.
Go.
So his point was that in many parts of the country, in many communities, it's always been 1960. If you go back to the session that you guys had on Tuesday, you talk about what's going on in Rikers Island, a couple miles from here, with 16-year-olds being stopped and frisked throughout our city for the last couple of years and being sent to Rikers and being
isolated,
stabbed with pens and fighting over lunch boxes with unions. And I worked for labor unions who protect security guards and correctional officers who facilitate fights among children at Rikers Island, and that this is going on in New York City, the greatest city in the world. I mean, that's been here. And I think for those kids and their families who go through that, I don't think they were surprised about what happened in this election. They know that there's certain ways that our country isn't working well. And I think it's incumbent upon journalists to get out there and talk to those people and really learn what is actually going on across our country in different kinds of communities and report that to our coastal elites.
But I think Jordyn raises a good point that I'm not on this panel. I'm sorry.
Maybe I can
go for it.
No. I saw a hand in the audience.
Was somebody going to respond? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that.
No, please. Do you mind sharing?
My name is Larcy Cooper. I'm Donnel's wife.
She's very sophisticated. Watch.
But I do think that there's something to be said about listening, and so I think that sometimes what comes the sensationalism comes from the desire to move product, to get eyeballs versus to actually tell the story, to get on the ground, to know the people, and to listen. And I think I recently went through organizer training, but before that, I always sort of appreciated Donnel's ability to really listen, regardless of class or power or status or how sort of artfully things are explained or the way that the English is used and how it resonates in your own ear, and to listen to the content and respect the person delivering the content. And so I think understanding what listening means is really important. And so I don't know, maybe do organizer training, but it changes how you listen. My cousin just went through it, right? Twice for the second time, and it does.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what I wrote on my
tell us what you wrote
on my pledge card. So I am a success story of the 6-month trial with BlocPower.
It's like Hunger Games,
and
rough.
It's very honest. It's about to win, right? He puts you in an opportunity to win, and if you don't win, then you don't succeed.
Get fired.
You get fired. And I've been fortunate that I've been there with BlocPower for the last 2 years. So 6-month trial, and fortunately I keep producing and we keep winning. But yes, I was fortunate enough to go through the organizer training, and my commitment to social change is over the next 10 days, I would like to have 3 one-on-one meetings with people from my community. Over the next 10 weeks, I would like to have 21 one-on-one meetings. And then over the next 10 months, I would like to have 100 one-on-one meetings with people from our community.
May the odds be ever in your favor. The only thing I would add, though, while I agree with you about the listening, I know I'm not supposed to be on this panel, but I just have to finish the thought I started to make. I do think that having diversity in the newsrooms is critical. Because while I think we can all have an open ear and heart and mind, Donnel's experience as a child makes him more empathetic and sympathetic when he listens. Now, that doesn't mean that, my mother's a white woman and she's empathetic and sympathetic and was teaching in the public schools for 40 years. But I do think that diversity helps us to open one another's minds, ears, and hearts when we sit around that table talking about the language.
Yeah, and thinking about it from a totally different, a restructure of what we think we know. Like that idea we were saying earlier about you don't know what you don't know. And that is so true. Like that is so true. And so, I mean, the thing that is in my hand right now is this.
What is that?
Yeah, so has anybody heard of this restaurant that's called Local that Roy Choi started out in Los Angeles and Oakland and just recently got panned by Pete Wells in the New York Times. It got a 0-star rating. And
Must be good.
Well, the thing that's super interesting and intersected here is that Local is designed as basically an empowerment employer. Not to overuse that word, but
I'm
it is.
sorry. I take it back. Empowerment. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Now I'm like, oh god. But the whole idea behind Local is to be a restaurant in the community for the community. So it's fast casual food, sustainably thought of, sustainably sourced. It comes from curated and catered chefs that are building restaurants in places like Oakland, Newark, thinking about expansion to the South Bronx, where all of those restaurants are staffed by members of the community. And so it's just the spirit. It's the vibe is the community. And so they got 0 stars in the New York Times. And this is in terms of Roy Choi's response back to that 0-star review. It was an Instagram post that he shared, and so the components of this that I think are really, it just hits a lot of the intersections. And he said, I know many of you want me to respond, snap back. The situation to me is much more than that. I welcome Pete's review. It tells me more about the path. I don't know Pete, but now he is inextricably linked to Local forever. So I'll share with you what I wrote to a friend and to our team. The truth is, Local has hit a nerve. Doesn't mean all people will love it, some hate it, but no one is indifferent by it. That's the spirit of Local. It has nothing to do with my ego. It's something bigger than all of us. Pete Wells is a component of its DNA. His criticisms are a reflection of us and the nerve that Local touches, and our imperfections. Also the nerve of challenging the binary structure of privileged thought patterns and how life is not just about what's success or failure, but some things are real struggles and growth journeys. We all know the food is not as bad as he states. Is it perfect? No. But is it as bad as he writes? And all minorities aren't criminals either. And all hoods aren't filled with dangerous people either. But the pen has created a lot of destruction over the course of history and continues to do so. He didn't need to go there, but he did. That's why he's part of Local, the power of this change and this nerve that it hits. It compelled him to write something he knows would hurt a community that is already born from a lot of pain and struggle. Crazy, right? But I see it as a whole piece of this puzzle. So
the only good thing that Pete Wells said in the review was that the bread was good, and the bread never gets mentioned in a review.
That's true.
So it was so clever. I mean, I was like shaken by how vicious he was, but I was like, yeah, but he called out the bread, so I'm gonna give him and the bread was great. So
yeah, this is their like image. This is the brand name Local, and then they have this little like noodle guy on the back, and the whole thing. Yeah. Anyway, so. Support it, look it up. It's pretty cool.
Probably the best thing that ever happened to them.
Yeah.
Jessamyn, do you have a commitment you'd like to ask of us?
Does anybody else have one that's like right on the top of their head? Because you've been asking me all night and I don't quite have the one. I mean, I already made a plea to support the small food businesses.
And we will.
We are going to order a bunch of bread from you guys. That's our commitment. And I know...
if I have something I want to ask all of you,
yeah.
If you don't have a commitment for all of us, and it's about your optimism. How do you stay so optimistic and so?
Can I read something?
I don't want to put optimism on you if you're not feeling it, but I'm feeling it from you.
I wanted to read.
Is that fair? Are you feeling that? Is it true?
No, but when I sit with these guys, I feel really optimistic. And I watched Cory Booker's statement at the confirmation 45 million times this week because
Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, the Jeff Sessions. Sorry, confirmation.
There were a lot of confirmations this week.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, killing your optimism. Okay, return to what you were saying.
Anyways, he referred back to the great quote about the he said the arc of the moral universe doesn't naturally curve towards justice, kind of speaking to the Martin Luther King quote. He said we must bend it, and I was thinking a lot about that, and it really spoke volumes to me. And I have this image of like Echoing Green and Jordyn and Donnel and me. We're all like on the natural arc, but we have gravity on our side. And, you know, I think in the day-to-day challenges that are real challenges to kind of make these big ideas happen, like, it works. And so if you're not optimistic and you can't celebrate the successes and the small arc that you create in your day-to-day work, then I think you go crazy. So I feel like I have to be.
Very similar
I'm
to
optimistic.
the Tuesday message.
I'm
Please go ahead,
optimistic.
Donnel.
It's our time. I'm 35. It's our time. The generation that came in front of us, they tried, they did what they did. Everything's in ruins. Everything's in tatters. And it sucks. I mean, what are we talking about? Yeah. But there is no credibility, right, inside the current structures of progressive leadership or people who, you know, foundation role, whatever, who are people whose values, you know, drive them towards social and environmental change. The leaders of our side, there's no credibility. And for us as young leaders, the people that you've been talking to this week on this panel, it's now our time. And instead of having to spend the next 10 to 15 years fighting our way through the ranks of the leaders who were in front of us and ahead of us in line, like all of the people in Echoing Green that you guys, that are part of our community, like it is our time, and it is on us to figure out what comes next, because clearly, you know, people had no clue, right? So the mandate is on us, and I'm excited about that. I feel ready for the challenge. I think that our generation is ready. I think that we have a different way of thinking about race, a different way of thinking about class, a different way of thinking about parenting, about who's in our communities, how we relate to one another. And it is now time for us to impose our values on the Democratic Party and the rest of the country. And we are going to do it. I'm very optimistic about that. This might end up being the best thing that ever happened to our side.
And I think just to like go back to like what my request is, or what I'm asking people to commitment that I'm asking them to make. I think the other most compelling line in a speech that came this week was like, grab your clipboards and go get some signatures and run for office, right? So I think encouraging.
Are you announcing?
Yeah, no way. I said I was Canadian. So it's not on me, but somebody here, or 5 of you, or you that are like here and you're younger than I am, like that's the only thing that comes through clear. Like it is our moment, but it has to happen also through the democratic process, because that's what's super in tatters right now.
So you still believe in that? Okay, I don't want to put you on the spot. Jordyn.
Yeah, I'm optimistic, and as I sit out here and look out into this crowd of people also too, I'm optimistic because of the community that is here. Like I have community in the form of friends and family, and at my Echoing Green family and my Drive Change family, and funders who are in the room here too for Drive Change. Like that is community that is here, sitting here right now, and that is that makes me unbelievably optimistic. I mean, also, you know, knowing now that Vidal is going to be working for BlocPower, like that makes me
pending a successful.
That's amazing, right? So I do carry that optimism very, very much. I also, you know, part of the sort of trajectory for Drive Change potentially is that we start. We believe that if we can have infrastructure actually in the form of a garage or commissary space where other food truck businesses could come, park, prep, clean, store goods, buy wholesale, we could do something similar to what Jessamyn and Hopred is doing at Incubates, and like have an ecosystem, have a community. And the reality is that I'm meeting with these other small business owners who have so much on their plate, and they are so invested in being committed to social justice and social missions in our talks and conversations, and their desire to want to support young adults coming home from the system as well. That is incredible. So just knowing that, you know, there's the real possibility for community leverage is something that I feel makes me incredibly optimistic. Yeah.
Question.
Oh, great. Are you going to express your optimism?
Yes, I guess it's a way.
After this night, I feel optimistic.
I feel definitely optimistic after listening to. I'm Peggy Siegel, and I'm here at the invitation of Echoing Green. And thank you all. This has been really amazing to listen to. One thing that struck me, and also in the idea of commitment and stuff, Donnel, you brought up how there was this recent change that the governor made that would allow in the state to, on your energy bill to select where your energy is coming from. And I guess I'm curious, are there any other specific, because it's a very specific sort of policy change at a certain level that has serious impact. Are there other specific policy issues that would have a big impact on any of what the social change you're all looking to do?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I would be very interested in revising and rethinking procurement. And I think right now talking anything at the federal level doesn't make sense. So kind of the thing that I want to think about is how the city spends its dollars. And there are a lot of other places that have more progressive buying that supports social enterprise and other things. So that, to me, is a really powerful policy intervention that could create a lot of job training opportunities.
There are two that are coming to mind right now. One is that New York still has not raised the age of adult criminal responsibility in New York. So it's 16 years old right now. It's just New York and North Carolina.
Wow.
It's gone through Assembly like 3 years in a row and still has not been passed. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the majority of jobs are in upstate New York areas are really sustained by the prison industrial complex. But that is very, very important. Then other than that, very, very specifically, New York has had a cap on unrestricted mobile vending permits for the last 7 years. So actually, we don't have an unrestricted mobile vending permit. We have a restricted area one, which means the places that we can go are slightly limited. So there's a bill, 1303. It's called the Street Vendor Modernization Act that's currently at City Council. So any support on that in whatever way people could, that would be beneficial for us.
Yeah, I could go on and on about policy. One that comes to mind is we should start counting all the votes in the different elections. And when people vote, it shouldn't become a provisional ballot that never gets counted. And then the Republican Attorney General of Michigan says that it doesn't matter. So I just think as a baseline, hitting the reset button on the basic democratic institutions and apparatus and infrastructure, count all the votes, that'd be great. But more locally, it is a great time to be a New Yorker, and I think that because of one of the things that our governor has not gotten credit for is really courageous stances that he has taken on climate. He has deregulated the fossil fuel-based utility industry in New York State and is forcing utility companies to really reconsider the ways that they are investing in local distributed renewable energy so that people all across our state have access to producing and consuming renewable power locally. And no state, not even California, has been as aggressive as New York State in kind of unlocking the potential of local distributed renewable energy and energy efficiency. And I think as New Yorkers, as sitting in Manhattan, which is going to be underwater if we don't watch it, by the time that our kids grow up. We need to take advantage of this kind of unique policy opportunity to think about the ways that we can all participate in a clean energy economy. And for us, then making sure that the jobs that are created in this new industry, that we can own and operate and control it, and therefore control the jobs and who gets hired, and make sure that the wealth that gets created is distributed in a fair and equitable way to various kinds of stakeholders. So we really do have an extraordinary opportunity locally, and if we can make it work here in New York City and New York State, I think that other states because no one's going to be looking at the federal government for anything, for any leadership on these issues right now, right? Other states can kind of follow us.
We have a commitment back here.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you so much for your energy and your inspiration. My name is Marissa, and I'm going to ask you to hold me all accountable to this. I feel like if you say it out loud, it'll be true. So, I am with the election and the challenging times that we're in right now. I thought a lot about where do I belong? Where do I need to be? Do I need to be in the streets? Do I need to be in D.C. on the 21st? And I decided I want to be in jail. And what I mean by that is we work with young people, my organization, we work with young people in jail. And on the 21st, I want to be there with them, and I want to be there with them in engaging them around human rights issues. This is what we do, and engaging them, sharing with them the artistic tools that in order to create, become organizers themselves. So I want to be there on the 21st. I want to be there and continue to do the things that we're already doing and better, you know? So I think I want to be there. And I also want to say that we're committed to being, until this racist system is shut down, we're committed to being where the young people are. So if that means in the jails, if that means supporting immigrant communities, we're going to be there, and our organization is also going to continue to build a movement. And I think right now more than ever we need a movement that is of creativity, of self-expression, and that's irresistible, because this is the time that we need we need new change, and we need to think creatively and out of the box. So I'm committed to that, and hopefully, like I said, being in this room with people that I'm going to be there. So
what's the name of your organization?
Thank you. The organization is called Art and Resistance Through Education. So thank you.
Thank you. That was a pretty good way to begin to wind down our evening. I have to say a very special thank you. Oh, I guess I should. Thank you. It's my buddy here, Ricardo. Makes it all happen. I have to say a very special thank you to Ricardo, but also a very special thank you to Cheryl Dorsey.
Yes.
You knew it was coming. Could you stand up? Come on. Cheryl is honestly one of my heroes. I've known her for a long time, and she's a visionary, as I think many of you in this room know. She's a former Echoing Green Fellow. So, am I right that you're the first Echoing Green Fellow to run this organization? So that gives her a special insight into the work these visionaries are doing. She's the president, of course, of Echoing Green, and we thank her so much for sharing all of these folks with us this week. I'm not going to remember them all, but of course, Glenn, Anu, Vineet, Catherine Finney, Deanna, just too many brilliant minds on this stage. I didn't write them down. I'm just doing it from memory. But they impressed me so much in my heart, in my soul, in my mind. I was inspired. And of course, I want to thank all of you for coming. I, of course, am going to have to thank, I'm coming to you all. But I have to thank our partners, because that's part of what we do. HIG Capital, of course, the Jerome L. Green Foundation, and Audible.com. And I want to say that if you missed any of the events, because we did refer to them several times, if you missed any of the events earlier this week, you can revisit all of the events this week at thegreenspace.org. A very, very special thank you to our partners this week, Echoing Green, for bringing us this brilliant week of inspiring events. I think we began to tackle some of the changes, because of the inspiring work of people like these three brilliant people with us today. So thank you so much to Jordyn, to Donnel, and to my beautiful friend here. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And bring us some bread next time.
I'm going to send you a pack.
And I think Donnel and Jordyn and Jessamyn are all going to... Are you able to stay here, all three of you, and talk?
Sure. Absolutely.
With the folk. Some of you I know are social entrepreneurs, and you may actually have very specific questions for Jessamyn, Donnel, or Jordyn, and you can ask them questions about how they kickstarted their ideas or how they got to that next phase. And I think you can stick around for a few minutes and have a little.
It'd be a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim.